That's pretty bad.
I thought it was more or less rubbish, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think rap in general, I can't
So what is it?
understand
What are your musical tastes?
Oh, I like a little classical music, or I like a bit of Sinatra, and Catholic, I would say. Catholic taste. But
well, I'll tell you what, Des. I will put rap in, but there's a big price to pay.
Yes, what is it?
I'll put rap in if you'll do a rap for us here tonight.
Should I do it?
Is it a deal?
I'll give it a go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Des Lynam. Take it away, Des.
Hey, tell you what.
I'm feeling devilishly hot.
Hey, tell you what.
I'm feeling devilishly hot.
Hey, tell you what, I'm Des Lynam MC, and I used to work for the BBC. I think you can see I'm an ordinary chap, like most of us here. I can't stand rap. But I'm king of the hill, and I know my sport. What I don't know just can't be taught. I'm a flasher grandmaster, then Grandmaster Flash. No big gold chain, but a big grey tash. I won't touch cocaine, I won't touch a reefer. Both have been clearly outlawed by FIFA. They say rapping's hard, but I say this. Making it rhyme's a piece of cake.
I'm feeling devilishly hot. I'm feeling devilishly hot.
I drive round town in my big flesh roller in case I bump into David Ginola. Those other MCs, they just can't hack it. I'm so much smarter in my tie and jacket. The housewives reckon I'm a bit of a smasher. Word up, wicked, boo your casher. So word goes out to Lineker and Brookett. You're all suckers and no one's looking. Cause I'm on the other side and I'm on the make. With detailed analysis after the break. Hold on, a word is just coming through. It's Liverpool 1, West Ham 2.
Hey, tell you what.
I'm feeling devilishly hot.
England on the countdown to the World Cup with a friendly against Sweden on Saturday. Kick-off at 3 on BBC Radio 5 Live and extended highlights on Match of the Day at 5:30 on BBC One.
You know, I was in a shop.
Ouch! I pricked myself.
Honestly, darling, you've got blood all over your melon bird.
Can I take your cherry?
Steve Coogan stars in Dr. Terrible's House of Horrible, starting Monday at 9:30 on BBC Two.
Save it for Mondays.
All these images are classed as taboo. Images too taboo for this trailer. Images some would rather you didn't see. And we didn't discuss.
You may find some of the pictures distressing.
Find out why in a new 4-part series presented by Joan Baker, starting with nudity. Taboo, Wednesday the 21st of November on BBC Two.
Now on BBC Two, Friday's Newsnight and Newsnight Review with Kirsty Walk and Mark Lawson.
The Taliban suffer their first defeat as the Northern Alliance take a key stronghold. How long before they move on Kabul? Good evening. Mazar-e-Sharif appears to have fallen to the Northern Alliance, aided by American bombs. With reports that they're planning an advance on Kabul within hours, will they lay claim to government if they eventually defeat the Taliban? Also, they have nothing to lose but their Ferraris, while some of the highest paid men in the country are threatening to strike. And is big business out to rule the world? As the World Trade Meeting kicks off in Qatar, have the anti-globalizers got a point?
And on Newsnight Review at 11, Jermaine Greer, Echo Escher and Billy Bragg join me to discuss the trick of turning books into money in the first Harry Potter film, Morecambe and Wise resurrected in the play What I Wrote, and will the 2001 Turner Prize for Art switch people on or off?
After almost 5 weeks of bombing, a breakthrough in the war in Afghanistan. Supported by American air attack and special forces on the ground, the Northern Alliance say they've captured the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif. The offensive was led by the opposition warlord General Rashmi Dostum and his mainly Uzbeki forces. If they manage to hold the city, it would create a corridor down from Uzbekistan for Western forces. Now attention turns towards the Northern Alliance fighters backed by tanks massing at the front line just north of Kabul. Here's our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban.
Well, Kirsty, the Northern Alliance had been promising to take the town pretty much every day for the past month. During the first week of the campaign, Alliance forces managed to reach the airfield perimeter southeast of Mazar, but following that brief success, the Taliban counterattacked and pushed them back south off the plain, 25 kilometers back into the mountains. During this time, the Americans were bombing away pretty much daily. They'd hit a barracks on the first day of the strikes, but as the campaign developed, increasingly they focused on Taliban front lines. During the past week, they'd been using B-52 strikes, with a report emerging yesterday that one of those attacks on Wednesday had killed 85 Pakistani volunteers near Mazar. By then, a new Northern Alliance offensive had begun, and reports suggest that earlier today they attacked again from the south and from positions north of the city, driving the Taliban defenders out to the east.
The United Front and other Northern Alliance forces entered the Mazar-e-Sharif city. Now they are controlling all the Mazar-e-Sharif city, including airport and Corps Commander's headquarters, Qalai Jangi, and all area around Mazar-e-Sharif.
Now, what about the wider importance of Mazar-e-Sharif, if indeed the Alliance can hold on to it? Well, firstly, he who owns the city and its airfield tends to dominate the whole of the Oxus Plain, and that means the Northern Alliance could easily move on to take other provincial centres on that plain, like Shibagan and Faizabad, in the coming days. Secondly, holding Mazar and its surroundings opens the trade route from Uzbekistan with its railhead and bridge at Termez, making it easy to bring in heavy stores, anything from tanks to tents. Lastly, if the Northern Alliance is able to block the passes through the high mountains, and it already has most of them, then Taliban forces in the north may be unable to escape, a strong incentive to them to surrender. So what next? General Dostum and his troops will be eager to open up their Uzbek heartlands in the provinces to the west of Mazar. But the key will be clearing the old Salang road tunnel to the south so that the Alliance has a supply route through the Hindu Kush mountain barrier. That'll be vital to taking and then feeding Kabul. And there are reports tonight that Northern Alliance forces have moved at least 800 men and dozens of armoured vehicles towards Taliban positions on the Shomali plain just north of the capital. Kabul will be a tougher nut than Mazar, no doubt, but it's possible that we may soon get an idea of what effect all those American airstrikes have had there too. In summary, the capture of Mazar is very important for the Northern Alliance, particularly psychologically, but let's not get carried away with terms like strategic. It won't decide the fate of the war overall because it does little to clear those provinces in the south of the country where the Taliban and the Pashtuns have their heartlands. Maybe that's one reason why the Pentagon this evening welcomed today's news in rather guarded terms.
What we have today is a very fluid situation, and we're getting bits and pieces of information. So what we're going to say is what we have seen is encouraging. In terms of what goes forward, we just tend not to comment on things that might happen from here.
Mark Urban. Well, I'm joined now from Washington by Omar Samad, who is the director of the Afghan Information Center, an anti-Taliban organization. Mr. Samad, first of all, in your assessment and from people you've spoken to, will the Northern Alliance be able to hold Mazar-e-Sharif?
Well, that is a good question. In the past, there have been occasions when Mazar-e-Sharif has changed hands. I assume that this time the Northern Alliance will be holding on to Mazar-e-Sharif and the surrounding areas. It all depends on how much damage the Taliban and their foreign backers, mainly the Pakistanis and the Arabs and the Chechens that they have brought over in the past couple of days to defend Mazar-e-Sharif, have been hurt. I suppose that the three-pronged attacks from three directions, mainly from General Dostum on the southwestern side, General Atta Muhammad from the southern side, and General Mohaqiq from the southeastern side, will eventually disperse into other provinces, as your report earlier indicated, going westward and eastward. So in the next 24 hours to 48 hours, we'll see how this trend will develop.
So the Americans particularly will be watching how the Northern Alliance, General Dostum and the others deal with Mazar-e Sharif and how they behave in the city. What is your assessment of that?
It is very important to see how they behave. Obviously, they do understand that they have the whole world watching, and they do also understand that they have the Afghans watching. We do not want to see repeats of mistakes and blunders that were committed in the past. As you know, in 1997, the first time the Taliban entered Mazar-e Sharif, there was a revolt against them, and in the process, the Northern Alliance at the time commander who was switched to the Taliban side switched again, and later on some Taliban soldiers were captured and executed, as is alleged. The second time the Taliban came with a revenge, they actually committed horrendous civil and human rights violations in Mazar-e Sharif. Up to 12,000 civilians were killed, avenging what had happened in 1997. So obviously we do not want to see any of that happening again, and these forces have a responsibility to make sure that whatever ethnic group is involved in the area, that they all become part of a new administration.
Because General Dostum himself is a man with a pretty violent past, isn't he?
Back in the 1980s, when he was allied with the communist regime and the Soviets, he had a pretty bad reputation when it came to human rights violations. And when he was in Kabul following the overthrow of the communist regime, General Dostum did not play a very positive role, but over time, he mellowed down and he became more concerned about human rights, and he became a populist in a sense among especially the Uzbeks in the north.
What do you think the chances are of the Northern Alliance taking Kabul? Again, there are concerns from the West about that move.
Well, I think that the next move is going to be east and west of Mazar-e Sharif, toward the provinces of Takhar, the city of Talokan, the city of Kunduz, Sheberghan, Maymana, and you will probably see a move towards Herat from Ismail Khan, another renowned commander in the northwestern part of the country. He obviously needs help and assistance, and the world needs to pay attention to that. But there will be definitely a move towards Kabul in the next 2 to 3 weeks. You already have
sorry, just to interrupt, we're short of time, but rather than sooner, you think it'll be a longer-term move to Kabul. What, very briefly, are the chances of Taliban troops defecting as news of the victory in Mazar-e Sharif increases?
Major psychological impact on the Taliban. You will see more Taliban commanders, especially Afghan Taliban, defecting, and this will make it easier to move toward Kabul and other provincial cities.
Omar Samad, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
The endearing sight of males of the species, mostly, slumping in front of the TV, clutching a can of lager, shouting at the football, may sadly be in jeopardy. Today, 99% of professional footballers backed a call for industrial action in a dispute that centres on the allocation of cash from TV rights. The Professional Football Association, the footballers' body, wants double what it's been offered by the Premier League and the Football Association. Now it's possible that a high-profile game, such as Arsenal versus Manchester United on November the 25th, the cameras could be switched off and only the fans inside Highbury will get to see the action. Here's our business correspondent, Paul Mason.
This is the Self-Preservation Society.
Professional footballers are in revolt. It's not about pay, they get plenty of that. It's about television money. The Professional Footballers Association wants its traditional 5% cut. If they don't get it, Britain's 3,500 professional players say they'll strike. Today, they delivered a massive yes vote for industrial action. If the issue is not resolved by December, they'll refuse to turn out in front of the cameras.
The number voting yes, 2,290. Over 99% of the valid vote.
Since the first ball was kicked on TV, the PFA has been getting a percentage of the league's TV revenues. Now, with TV companies committed to pay £1.5 billion over the next 3 years, it's the football bosses who are forming a defensive wall around their profits. They've cut the PFA's share from 5% to less than 2%.
I have to say I find it absolutely ludicrous that we're in this position. The way in which the PFA have, employed these Scargill-esque type tactics to take us back to the sort of dark days of the 60s and 70s and calling for strike action for a group of individuals who, let's face it, with the best will in the world, are some of the most privileged in terms of amounts that are paid.
But the PFA says it's not the privileged who benefit. It wants the money to help train young players and look after those whose careers are cut short. Paul Elliott played for Chelsea and England, but he had to retire in 1994 following a severe leg injury. Money from the PFA helped him retrain.
There's a wide range of packages that are available to all players, and obviously myself took advantage of the educational packages to educate myself, and the coaching packages as well. And one thing with the PFA, I mean, many people are talking about the sort of current issues, but what they do, you know, it's not just about supporting the higher echelon player, the millionaires, who probably only 2 or 3% earn that kind of money. Obviously, you're looking at their support for the smaller players, current players, previous players, and those that's been in the game a long, long time.
The background to this outbreak of class struggle is that football's become big business. As its cash flow structure has changed, player power has increased. In the 1999-2000 season, TV receipts for the whole Premiership were over £240 million. Gate money was £260 million. Sponsorship deals and the like brought in £270 million, and transfer fees coming in were £110 million. When it comes to spending, wages were a massive £470 million. Other operating costs were £224 million, and transfer fees paid out were more than £250 million. The lion's share of the spending is on players, and it left the Premiership clubs collectively £58 million in the red.
I think it's absolutely right that players get well rewarded for what they do. At the end of the day, there's a free market for players' services. Players are, you know, the assets that people come and watch, and it's absolutely right that players get well rewarded. Obviously, the clubs do have to have a careful look at what their revenues are going to be going forward, and therefore what can they afford to write contracts to players at the moment to pay them.
If it does come down to a strike, then the TV companies and the employers will be locked in a battle for the hearts and minds of the fans. Now, all football fans have stood on the sidelines and called players every name under the sun, but today it seems to be different. Maybe because of saturation TV coverage, or maybe because of the superb skills on offer on the pitch. But today's football players seem to have become the living embodiment of the dreams of millions. And if they take on the big business interests in the sport, they could have a lot of support.
If we can spread our game out...
Like many things in football, it's all Jimmy Hill's fault. 40 years ago, he led a strike to abolish the £20 a week maximum wage for players. But what really boosted player power was the 1995 Bosman ruling. Backed up by another, more recent ruling, it means shorter contracts and a move from high transfer fees to high wages.
It's given players increased strength, and rightly so. For many years, the clubs have always had the aces. Now the players have got that. The players are the entertainers. They're the one that's putting backsides on the seats, and they've been rightfully rewarded. And all it does, it just puts, you know, players in a very, very strong negotiating position financially. You know, that's why clubs now, you know, if a player signs a 3-year contract, you know, after 18 months they're reviewing that contract.
Some believe the current TV mega deal will be the last. In a few years' time, we could see the big clubs televising their own matches and players demanding the right to individual broadcast money. But for the next 3 years, the people who bake the football cake will be asking for a bigger piece of the pie.
Paul Mason. The World Trade Talks this weekend in Qatar are being billed by the British government as a chance to unite the world economy and form a coalition against terrorism through globalization and trade. Thus, an unfortunate and presumably unintended connection between anti-globalization and terrorism has been suggested. In this pursuit of economic growth, a treaty of trade and services is up for discussion. But who will benefit? In a moment, I'll be speaking to the International Trade Minister, Baroness Simons, in Qatar. But first, Greg Pallas looks at how big business influences the agenda.
142 nations happily singing the same song. That's what WTO boss Michael Moore wants us to hear.
For all of us, our prosperity depends on the purchasing power and therefore the prosperity of others.
The protesters want to bring the show to a halt, but back in the USA, the chambers of commerce are driving the globalization agenda on. They won't let the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington deflect them. or take America out of the game for more than a minute.
We'll pause and remember the folks who perished in New York and Washington and Pennsylvania, but we owe it to their memory to keep on keeping on. You can't stop riding the trade bicycle. It has to keep moving or everything begins to deteriorate.
In the chaotic days following the attacks, some went even further.
After September 11th, the U.S. trade representative said we have a stark choice between the agenda of the globalizers and the agenda of the terrorists. But what's really at stake in Doha this weekend is who owns the tube, who's in control of the National Health Service and the post office, even who makes those decisions. If it's up to the globalizers, it won't be Westminster.
The key to understanding how the fate of the tube and post office are linked to the WTO talks is through a proposed expansion of a rule called national treatment. National treatment is already in operation in the North America Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA is where U.S. industry tests its trade weapons before rolling them out across the rest of the planet.
And under these NAFTA rules, America's UPS is challenging the Canadian Post Office.
The thing you got to watch for in the WTO is, for instance, what's happened under NAFTA already. UPS is